Okay, well, I'd like to call up Senior Associate Commissioner Russell Johnston, Quincy Public Schools Interim Superintendent Kevin Mulvey, and Quincy Public Schools Assistant Superintendent Erin Perkins. Welcome.
So if I could just set the table, Madam Chair, I just want to say that, I think people have seen in our guidance that we've really put a priority on trying to get our most vulnerable students back into school as quickly as possible. When we talk about, for instance, special education students, we've heard repeatedly from parents about the regression that had taken place from some of their children because they weren't in school getting the services they need. So we really put a push on people prioritizing our most needy students, second language learners, kids that have been off track, kids with special needs, to try to give them as much in-person instruction as possible. One of the school systems that really helped lead the way this summer when we started standing up summer programming are here before you today, which is the Quincy Public Schools, and they're here to tell their story about how they were able to bring special education students back this summer and then do even more for other vulnerable populations of kids. So just an honor to have Superintendent Mulvey, Assistant Superintendent Perkins, and as much of an honor, I guess, to have Deputy Assistant Commissioner Russell Johnson.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really just so pleased to, as you said, introduce our guest today. We did have, as you mentioned earlier, over 90 schools and districts that welcome students back for in-person learning for the first time this summer. And they were predominantly students with disabilities. We had over 3,000 students in the state who received in-person learning for the first time. There were a handful of cases that we're aware of from within these programs. The important thing to note is that every single program, all 90 programs, despite having isolated cases, were able to remain open all summer. And Quincy is a shining example of that. Certainly there were a few cases that were reported publicly, but that's not the story of what happened in Quincy last summer whatsoever. So pleased for Kevin and Erin to share their story, how their experiences this summer led to key learnings that helped them even expand services further this fall. And I'm not going to steal the superintendent's thunder, but he might have something to say about those computers, those Chromebooks that you mentioned, Commissioner, earlier, and Quincy's involvement in that project, kind of late-breaking news that I think should be encouraging for the board as well. So, Kevin, Erin, I'm really pleased to turn it over to you to tell the Quincy story so that we can all learn from your experiences.
Great, thank you so much. And good morning, Chairperson Craven, members of the board, Commissioner Riley, Assistant Commissioner Johnson. We greatly appreciate the invitation that was given to us today to present to you our program in Quincy, particularly our summer program, Advancing Student Learning During the COVID-19 Crisis. The programming not only deals with in-person special education program, but also a rigorous and robust remote synchronous program as well that we'll be reviewing with you today. And as Associate Commissioner Johnson says, we do have some very good news with regard to the Chromebook initiative that we were able to work through the state, and I'll talk about that closer to the end of the presentation. So at this point, I would like to introduce first Assistant Superintendent Erin Perkins, and hand the presentation over to Mrs. Perkins so that she can review with you the initiatives.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today because we had a staff that came together over the summer and worked extremely hard, and I couldn't be prouder of what we accomplished, especially given the crisis that we're all dealing with in terms of COVID-19. So I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background on how we began. So we knew that at the end of the school year last year that we had a problem. We had parents who had told us, both regular education parents and special education parents, that told us that the remote learning model at the end of the school last year just was not working for their child. It was not effective. And I know, being educators in this room and being committed to our students, how difficult that is for us to hear, and what a priority we place and pride in our educational system. And so knowing that we really needed to figure out how we were going to address this issue, and parents were talking to us about, how are we going to, given all of the things that happened in the spring and what they would consider a lack of educational services in the spring, how are we going to remediate that as a district for the fall? And then, there was students with disabilities whose families expressed extreme concern because of the danger of regression and the regression that some of our students faced during the spring months. We were a district that did provide services remotely to our students during, the end of the school year. However, when you are a parent of a child with special needs, I think we all understand how difficult that is and how we cannot replicate those services for many of our students on a remote platform. And I know as a former special education teacher how concerning it was to me when a student was absent for 2 days, never mind being, working remotely from school for the whole end of the school year. And so how are we going to support those students and, remediate any regression that they may have experienced in the spring months? So as a district, we had a question that we had to solve. We needed to figure out how we could reach as many students as possible, but also think about ahead to the fall and how are we going to prepare our staff and our families for our in-person instruction or our remote instruction this school year. And so we came together as a district to try to find solutions for our students. And so we were, there were things that we were absolutely committed to as a school system. We were definitely committed to creating a safe in-person environment for our most vulnerable students. And, I have to thank Russell for helping us through that, in all of his guidance, because those meetings that he offered us as special education directors were definitely instrumental in how we went forward and planned for our in-person program. We also were committed to providing a remote alternative for families that didn't yet feel comfortable sending their children back to school. And we had this other kind of group of students that we really felt strongly that we needed to reach. And those were the students that needed to focus on the prerequisite standards so that we could remediate any gaps or holes in their education as we looked forward to the fall. And then, one of our other final commitments was that we really needed to focus as a district on creating a well-trained staff, and that is not only for our remote learning instruction, but also for our in-person. As we all know, so many things have changed with COVID-19. We have to be really aware. If you're a teacher of a student with autism, how do you work with that child while maintaining 6 feet of distance? It's extremely challenging, but it was something that we were committed to tackling and figuring out and providing the safest possible option for our students. So as a result, we were able to offer an in-person summer program for 136 of our students. The program met every day, and we had 50 dedicated staff that worked with our students. I cannot say enough wonderful things about these teachers. These teachers, they were nervous. Our families were nervous. They trusted us. And as a result, even though we did, as Russell mentioned, we did have a couple of positive cases, we were able to keep our program open and we kept moving forward. And our students received the services that they absolutely desperately needed. And then in addition, we were able to provide a remote learning summer program, which I'll talk about, that reached 2,300 students and was instructed by 122 staff members. And then finally, working together as a team and as a district, this year we were able to start our school year with 2,074 students returning either in person fully or in a hybrid model. So just to tell you a little bit about what we did for our summer in-person model. We identified who we were going to target, and so we targeted our students in our substantially separate programs because those were what we considered to be our most vulnerable population at that time. And so we invited all of those children to our summer program, but we also offered those families a remote learning option if they did not feel comfortable sending their children into school, which we totally understood. we had to get kind of creative and think outside the box in how we were going to develop this program. Typically, we would have had multiple programs running across the district in person, and we knew for this summer that really wasn't going to be manageable for us. And so what we did was we moved our program to the high school. We had 2 programs running. We moved one program to the high school, our kindergarten through, age 22 program. And we took the high school classrooms and literally converted them into elementary school classrooms. And we did that because we knew that the high schools were big. We could spread our children out. The children could be kept in really, really small cohorts, and they didn't have to, mingle with the other children. So that would keep, if there was a positive case, we were able to keep that really contained. We were also able to assign a bathroom to each of the classrooms. So that was, kind of key, because all of this was new for us, and so we needed to make sure that we had the best safety precautions in place for our in-person students. So as I said, we kept our students in small cohorts. We had masks. We had the transparent masks over the mouth so that our students could see our facial reactions and feel comfortable. They were worn by all staff. Many of our students could not tolerate wearing masks. We worked with them, and we, tried to increase that mask wearing time as much as we can. And then the other thing that we had to really rethink was the way we did transportation. So the capacity restrictions, especially at that time on our buses, were pretty significant, and then, also, having drivers and all of the different supports that we needed for our students. So what we ended up doing was we ended up using what typically we would have used our smaller buses. We ended up using our large buses, and we hired paraprofessionals to ride on those buses. So that way we could get at least 11 children on each bus so that we could transport them to the location for the summer program. So we had to get really creative. We had to work together, and we had to be flexible and, and kind of really come together as a community to provide for our children. And so I just want to talk a little bit also about what we did for our remote summer program, because this was another one of our commitments and something that I know Superintendent Mulvey and I feel very strongly about, that the feedback that we got from our spring program, our spring summer learning, was that it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for our students. It didn't do enough for our students. And so we were committed to changing that. And so we knew that if we could offer a program to our children over the summer, that this could be a way to kind of set the stage for the fall. So if we could create a program that could be a small model of what we could do for the fall, we would be in much better shape for opening our fall program. And so we created a live synchronous summer program for any child in the district that wanted a summer program. And that's why, as a result, we ended up reaching just about 2,300 students. So it met 4 days a week. Our summer programs. We had a whole range of different summer programs, but they met in general 4 days a week for a couple hours every day. The teaching was live the entire time. So it was all synchronous live instruction provided by a teacher. We incorporated other components to our program because we felt really strongly that students should just not be sitting in front of a computer, for 3 hours a day, every day. And so we had gym teachers doing synchronous gym instruction. We had art teachers doing art instruction. We had our guidance counselors and our psychologists meeting with our children at least once a week and doing social, emotional, and wellness lessons with our students. And then if you were in, grades 1 and 2, you received literacy intervention from a literacy literacy interventionist twice a week. We also we weaved into that program our support for English language learners. So we had, at the elementary school level, the English language learner students would be pulled by our English language learner educators and receive their instruction that way. We also offered programs at our different levels in our school just for our English language learners to support them. We offered advanced placement programming options remotely, synchronously for our students. We offered transition programs because we also saw that as a hole that we needed to fill, that our children had left, say, 5th grade or 8th grade, and were not able to have the traditional transitional supports that we would have provided to them on a normal school year. So we provided a transition program for our kids entering 6th grade and our kids entering 9th grade, taught by our high school teachers, taught by our middle school teachers, so that those students could get a flavor of what middle school and high school life was going to be like for them. We offered SAT prep, and we offered credit recovery. We offered many different programs. This is just a sampling of the different things that we offered, and we tried to reach every possible student that we could. And we focused on the prerequisite standards so that we could help support our students so they were ready to enter the grade level in the fall. So our high needs students, during our school year 2020, so all of this work was done so that we could start preparing and planning for how we were going to enter this fall. And, again, I have to say I am so proud of our staff, and I know Mr. Mulvey is as well, and our families, because I feel that given the crisis that we're all experiencing, we have been able to do amazing things, and we've really been able to support our students. And so as a result of the work that we did, we knew we could do it. We knew we could bring our students back that needed to come back. And so we entered in the fall with bringing all of our substantially separate programs, began on September 16th in person. And that's a 5-day-a-week program. We also brought back all of our students who were receiving any type of special education service, any type of English language education, and students who did not have access to technology were all invited back into our buildings. And those programs started on September 17th. So those children are coming to school currently right now 4 days a week. So they come Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. Wednesday, our substantially separate students are in the building, but all of our other students are home so that we can do a deep clean of our schools. The other students that we were able to bring back, and again, I think it's been really successful, is our phase 1 of our hybrid model. So we have our students in pre-kindergarten through grade 3 who started on September 17th, who have been going to school on Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday, depending on what cohort they are in. And the children that are coming back, in our high needs groups are also participating in some instances in those cohorts, because we did not want to have children just completely isolated from their regular education peers. And so we made sure that we have those students also participating in their cohorts. And we are currently knee-deep in the planning of phase 2, which is scheduled to begin on October 13th, and we are bringing the rest of the district back on October 13th. So we are, our grades 4 through 12 will be returning in the cohort model, and we are doing the 2-day-a-week model. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a pretty intense remote learning model for our students. So we are providing live synchronous instruction for our students every day, a full school day, with all of the classes they would typically have at all grade levels for those children who have opted to remain remote. And now I will turn it back to Mr. Mulvey.
Thank you, Mrs. Perkins. And now I just want to review with you our funding sources. And I have to give a big thank you to Mayor Thomas Koch and our own school committee, who have both been extremely supportive in all of our initiatives. So, for instance, $426,840 was spent on staffing and program development. This was money above and beyond our annual budget that the mayor and the school committee approved for us, particularly to run our summer programs, which were so critical, as Mrs. Perkins said, in addressing any type of regression due to the COVID-19 outbreaks that began in March. And then we had 380, I'm just going to skip technology, I'll talk about that last because I do want to talk about the Chromebooks, but the mayor also allocated $384,425 spent on personal protective equipment. So we have a extremely large amount of PPE in the district, which is great. And I know many other surrounding districts and towns around Quincy struggled with this, but the mayor committed to this early on with regard to obtaining the necessary PPE. And we're very grateful for that because all of our schools are well stocked and supplied, and we have 7 vendors on call that can resupply as we use this material. So we're very happy about that. And lastly, you can see the very large number there, $3 million was spent on technology for our students and teachers. So just for instance, with this money, we purchased 1,000 laptops for our teachers. We purchased 7,000 Chromebooks initially, and I'll talk about that in great detail in a second. But we also spent significant money upgrading our bandwidth as well as our internet connectivity in all of our schools, because you can have all the Chromebooks in the world, but unless you have the internet support for it, it really is useless. So the mayor and the school committee recognized that and increased the infrastructure in those areas. And lastly, the technology related to Chromebooks. So in March, we immediately began researching and allocated money to purchase 7,000 Chromebooks, and we did go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, because of the global demand, we were notified that those Chromebooks would not be delivered until mid to late November. So with that, we immediately reached out to Commissioner Riley and Associate Commissioner Johnson to seek assistance with regard to getting another procurement of Chromebooks. And based on Commissioner Riley and Associate Commissioner Johnson's assistance, we were able to actually do a separate procurement of 2,500 Chromebooks, which arrived yesterday, which is fantastic. So I really want to thank everyone for that, because we were probably short 1,300 Chromebooks that students really needed. And in order to compensate that, we opened up mini labs in our buildings to bring children in. But this procurement will allow us to give all of these student Chromebooks so that they can continue, if they wish, remotely until we completely return in a hybrid model on October 13th. So again, I do want to thank the board and the commissioner for giving us the ability to procure these 2,500 Chromebooks. And again, they arrived ahead of time yesterday, which was great. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again for the invitation. Thank you, Commissioner Riley. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much for your dedication and for this great example that you set for everyone.